Is grace opposed to hard work? Right? In other words, since we've been saved by grace, does this eliminate the need to strenuously toil in response to grace? I believe we're going to see this amazing harmony between grace and hard work in our passage today, as well as a couple others we're going to look at. So our main passage is going to be Colossians 1. We're starting Colossians verses 28 and 29. He, Jesus, is the one we proclaim, admonishing and teaching everyone with all wisdom, so that we may present everyone fully mature in Christ. To this end, I strenuously contend with all the energy Christ so powerfully works in me. Now, before we dive a little bit deeper into this passage, I want to read a couple other passages to you that have a similar theme. So Philippians 2, 12 and 13, which actually is our text for Sunday, says this: Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only in my presence, but much more in my absence, now listen to this, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Now, 1 Corinthians 15, 9 and 10 says this: For I am the least of all the apostles, unworthy to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace toward me was not in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, though it was not I, but the grace of God with me. So we see this beautiful harmony of Paul striving, toiling, and telling us to work out our faith, but all in conjunction with God's grace, God's power, and God's enabling. So it's clear that grace is not opposed to hard work, but we see that we don't work hard to get grace. We work hard because of grace. So if grace is not opposed to hard work, then what does it look like to work hard in response to such grace? Now, I have to admit, this Colossians passage, it's one of my favorites in the Bible. Paul is strenuously contending to present his brothers and sisters mature in Christ. So for Paul, becoming mature in Christ, it wasn't an add-on to everything else in life. It was the primary thing in which life revolved around. And I desperately want this to be true about me, that I am strenuously toiling to present myself and others mature in Christ. Later in the book of Colossians, Paul says that he is contending for the Colossians, and he says that Epaphras is wrestling in prayer for them. Right? There is no amount of passivity in the way they lived out their faith. So what would it look like for you to strenuously toil to be presented mature in Christ? What would it look like for you to wrestle in prayer for someone? While anything to do with hard work may be something we initially scoff at, I cannot encourage you as well as myself enough to imitate Paul by strenuously toiling to grow in maturity, not to earn grace, but because of grace.